Hi, I'm Dawn Cavanaugh, APQS Education Director. I love my APQS long arm. It allows me to quilt an entire length of quilting section all at one time without having to baste a quilt. But you know, not everybody happens to have a big space for a traditional long arm. That's where George comes in. George is a wonderful opportunity to have all of the throat space of a long arm. In fact, 22 inches of throat space without having to take up all of the room space. Here the George table is actually 2 feet by 60 inches, so it gives me plenty of room to move fabric around. Well, I thought I'd show you some of the neat things that you can have for an accessory for George that makes it just like the stand-up long arms. The accessory feet are one of the most helpful tools in your toolbox to be able to use long arm rulers to get right up next to applique work, and in this case some buttons that a girlfriend sewed on prior to putting her quilt together, along with things like stitching in the ditch or even doing micro stippling where you're trying to see what you're doing. So let me show those feet to you and give you an idea of how you might use each one of those accessory feet to make the APQS George even more fun to use. George comes with a traditional short profile foot with a beveled bottom side. George has a built-in hopping foot, so the foot actually does jump up and down to help promote better stitch formation and give you beautiful stitches. But the beveled edge is very helpful because it actually helps to that foot to glide up over ridges, such as the seam here in this log cabin block of my snowman. It also makes it easier to get right up next to the edges of applique, so you can get really close with your outline stitching. The standard foot that comes with George is very versatile. It allows you to do everything from general quilting over the entire quilt all the way down to micro stippling and outlining applique, all without a lot of fuss. But sometimes having an accessory foot with just the right profile can make the job even easier to do. Let's take a look at what some of those optional feet can do for you and George. The first foot I'd like to talk about is the tall profile foot. This foot has a tall edge all the way around at 360 degrees so that I can use traditional long arm rulers to help stabilize my stitching in the ditch or do cross hatching or all sorts of fun different designs that require straight edges. The second foot has the same tall edge, and I'll take these out here and show you how I'll use them in a moment, but it's actually got the front end, see if I can turn it so that you can see it a little bit. There we go. It's got the front end of it cut out where I normally look into the foot. So it gives me a combination of the best of both worlds. I've got those tall edges to use on most of the foot to still stitch in the ditch and use my rulers, but a little increased visibility right in the front so that I can see over the edge. That way I can move back and forth between techniques like stitching in the ditch or background fill with ease. The third foot is just like the standard foot, but it also has a little bit of the front removed. A greater visibility is really key when you're trying to do tiny stitches or working on something like light fabrics where you've got white thread and white background where it's really hard to see. Let's put these different feet on George and see how you can put them to work. It's easy to change the foot on George with the quick change hopping foot. A single screw holds the screw in place. Let's see if I can do this backwards for you so that you can see. I'm going to loosen that screw. See if I got it loose enough. Ooh, yes I do. So that I can slip this standard foot right off of George here. Probably should have moved my quilt out from underneath it to make it easier to see. So let's grab that first one we talked about, the tall edge ruler foot, tall all the way around. We'll just slide it in front, slide it up into the shaft. I'm going to hold it and kind of center it there, and I'll get started by tightening that screw up with my fingertips. But of course it does need to be pretty tight since that foot's going to be hopping up and down. So reach around and give it a good snug adjustment. There we go. Now you can see what that looks like. Let's take a look at how we can put it to work quilting the edge of my little snowman. Well, unlike a traditional long arm where the fabric stays still and the machine moves, with George, the machine is still and we have to slide our fabric along. So it's important when we're using something like a ruler that we're trying to steady ourselves to have something on the underside of the ruler so that it has stability, but also a little grip. That way we can push and the fabric moves a lot easier, and along with that, it makes it easier to control right next to the hopping foot. I happen to be using these true grips, but anything like sandpaper or other grippies that you find in the store for rulers will work. Make sure as you're quilting you are using a traditional long arm ruler, which is actually 1/4 of an inch thick. This is thicker than your normal rotary cutting ruler. It's important that it's thicker because that foot is hopping up and down. So we don't want it to jump up and hop on top of a thinner ruler. It could cause, of course, the ruler to break and potentially make a little bit of a mess with the machine too. So we need that nice foot to be nice and tall. It may also help if you're especially working with a larger quilt than my little wall hanging here to treat the whole table with something like silicone basting spray. This one from Sullivan's is a product that works very easily. It does not stain the quilt or the table. Another product that you might like would be the actual polishing kit available from So Steady. Both of those are great options to help make things slide super simple all under the foot. Well, I'm not going to expect you to watch me quilt my whole snowman stitching in the ditch. I want to show you what those other feet do. But I'll give you an idea of how to actually work that ruler. So I've lined up my foot and my needle actually right in the corner of my red fabric. Here, I'll use the needle down and up with George to move and pull up my red bobbin thread. So what you'll do is train your eye to align the ruler actually 1/4 of an inch away from where you want to do the actual stitching. With that in place, then you will simply guide the fabric with the ruler, keeping the foot gently pressed against it. Here we go. I'm going to take a couple of tiny stitches to secure my threads. And George has the ability to stop and start needle down, so that way if I have a hiccup, I can stop the machine, lift my foot off the pedal, and make sure that I don't lose my place. There, you're getting the idea. You're seeing a little bit of the definition created by that stitching in the ditch. The tall foot is great for doing that. I switched to that tall profile foot with the opening right in the front. So you can see based on that, you got a lot more visibility, but I still have the option to switch over to my ruler. For example, as I'm following along right here along the snowman's hat. Then when I want to switch out and do my meandering, I can go back and forth between the two without having to switch the foot back and forth. Lastly, I've slipped on the lower profile open toe foot. Now you can see how much great visibility I'll have if I decide to do some tiny background quilting. As George's foot hops up and down, it's going to allow the fabric to move easily, but I'll definitely be able to see as I sneak in and out of all of these corners, rather than having to look right over the top of something like the tall edge of this foot. One thing it's important to note is that this foot is really not designed to be used in conjunction with rulers. Its lower profile means that there is a chance that I could accidentally lose my grip and have that ruler slip right up on top of that foot. So pay attention to what your technique you're trying to do here. If I'm needing to stitch this stitch, it's much safer to either freehand it or slip the actual tall profile foot right back on. But with this foot now in place, I can get going and do some small stippling. Actually, I think I'm going to do some loopies. Well, there you go. One little section done. Let's see if I can get that in front so you can see my loopies. Yay, there we go. Well, I'm going to finish up the snowman, but I hope that you've enjoyed learning a lot more about George. Well, as you can see, even if you have to scrimp a little bit on space and don't have room for a big long arm, it doesn't mean that you have to scrimp on features. With the extra throat space of George, you'll be able to quilt large quilts all the way down to small ones. And the accessory feet allow you to have all of the benefits of the large long arm right at your fingertips, from rulers to applique work, all the way down to micro stippling. The accessory feet are a wonderful addition to your George system. Be sure to look us up at apqs.com. Like us on Facebook. Check out our APQS YouTube channel for more wonderful videos about our APQS products, helpful tips and tutorials. Follow us on Instagram and check us out on Twitter. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.